Hey everybody, Melissa McKenzie back from vacation here at the Spectacle with Scott McKay. Once again, we got lots to talk about. As we sit here, the president, former President Trump, sits in a courthouse in Manhattan and is being arraigned on 34 counts of falsifying documents or something, to which he pled not guilty, Scott. Yep. First off, I'm like wondering, where are the Republicans? The silence is deafening. I have seen none of them say a word about it except for Scott Hawley. No, Josh Hawley. What am I doing? Scott Hawley.
Josh Hawley. Well, Josh or Jim Jordan rather is talking about, they're going to investigate Alvin Bragg in Congress, which is a little something. I'm not sure exactly how much they can do. I mean, he's a local DA. If he's catching federal money and they want to pull that out of the budget, I think that's a good idea. I mean, you've already heard me, because I think we talked about this 2 weeks ago. I mean, you've already heard me say economic warfare against New York City needs to be the rule of the day among conservatives. Like, let's impoverish that place down to the foundations, because the grand jury, which is made up of regular New Yorkers, maybe dumb as stumps, but they voted for this indictment. And that represents the city of New York. So this is the city of New York taking down the Republic. I think there should be consequences to that. And I think the city of New York should be economically burned to the ground as a result of this. And, they're doing a pretty good job of that already. With all the people that they've already run out of New York based on the way that place is governed. But I think that there should be intense suffering in New York City as a result of this. So don't buy anything that comes from New York, period.
Well, don't go to New York and give them their patronage.
Don't go to New York. But I mean, like any company that's got a headquarters in New York and somebody needs to make a really good list of that, don't buy their stuff. Pull out of New York and then we'll buy your stuff. But if you're in New York, out. And that's going to be hard because there's a whole lot of corporate headquarters that are in New York, but so be it. Conservatives ought to be buying local anyway. Okay. It's particularly conservatives who live in red states ought to be buying local. And this is a real serious kick in the pants that, it is time to disengage economically as much as possible from places like New York and LA and San Francisco and all the rest of these places that are, run by a machine that elects somebody like an Alvin Bragg as a district attorney, who is somebody who is absolutely antithetical to what this country was founded on and the principles of the republic that we're founded by. I mean, this, show me the man and I'll show you the crime crap that this, and look, I'm like, you and I have talked about this. I'm a lot like you. If it's me and you say, look, draft somebody to run for president, I'm going to say Ron DeSantis rather than Trump. And it's not even, an ideological thing. I just like somebody younger, right? Like, I mean, I just think he makes more sense. And I'm also, every time I see Trump attacking DeSantis, it makes me freaking break out in hives, because that's not the enemy. You're the presumptive front runner. Stick to, being a presumptive front runner and not punch down when people aren't even in the race yet. All of that drives me insane. But, this is bigger than that. When you start seeing a former president getting not prosecuted, persecuted by a penny ante asshole like Alvin Bragg, who, thinks that this is going to make him mayor of New York or governor of New York or whatever. And that guy, if you were to hide something from him, you would put it in a law book because he would never look for it there. And he's going to go.
Like, Scott, one thing I was talking to Kate, our lovely producer, about before we got on here is that they have been looking for something with Trump for years. Yeah. This guy is a real estate mogul in New York, Chicago, all over, places where there's the mob dealing with all sorts of things.
Right.
And they have looked and looked and looked. His IRS records were illegally leaked. He people have poured
This,
through his finances, his personal,
this
everything.
indictment was illegally leaked. You're not
Well, the thing
supposed to
is,
leak information about the indictment, and they leak, oh, it's 34 counts. That's an illegal leak. And
right.
Trump said it himself. Alvin Bragg ought to prosecute himself for the freaking leak, which of course he
so my point being is that if somebody came after you or me or really any American with this kind of ferocity, with our small little potatoes, finances and business or whatever, there would be a law that we have inadvertently broken that we could be in trouble for, because that's the state of America now. They have looked for Trump for something. Do you know how extraordinary it is that they have looked this long and come up so short with a guy who's as powerful as him? One almost gets the impression that the reason why they're going after him is because they have nothing to blackmail him with, and they're trying to find something. So because every other politician has skeletons, and so they want the deep state or whoever, the powers that be, they're behind the throne, have nothing to intimidate him with, except maybe threatening his children, which they've also done.
Well, they've also done it. Yeah. No, I think under the circumstances, one could conclude that Donald Trump is remarkably clean.
Right.
For having been in business in places like New York and Chicago for as long as he has. Like I made the joke to somebody a couple of days ago. It's like, the shadiest stuff that Trump is guilty of is like the protection money he paid to Rahm Emanuel and Chuck Schumer in the form of campaign contributions.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like he allowed himself to get shaken down by Democrat politicians like practically every other real estate and construction guy in those cities.
Well, he had to, though. I'm not saying like he's at fault for any of that, but like that's the price of poker if you're going to try to do business in New York. I mean, there's that famous scene from Back to School where Rodney Dangerfield is sitting in the business class and the professor's like, so we've budgeted all this stuff for our construction and our physical plan or whatever. And he sits in the back. He says, oh, you left out a whole bunch of stuff, right? And he starts talking about the union payoffs and all this. Let me tell you about garbage disposal. Runs that thing, but it ain't the Boy Scouts, right? I mean, like that's the world that Trump has had to live in, right? And for the fact that he's, endured years and years of scrutiny ever since 2015 when he got in, and like this is what they have, which is an NDA payment, right, to Stormy Daniels, who violated the NDA, right?
And the thing is, it's hush money. It's like, well, it's not even hush money because it came out anyway. And the point was like, but he was running for president. So it has to have been a campaign contribution he made to himself. And it's like, so in other words, if he wasn't running for president, he wouldn't pay hush money to somebody that could break up his marriage.
Right.
Like, I mean, look, I get the partisan animus. Like, I get that. Okay. Mm-hmm. What I don't get is the utter lack of perspective behind all this. Like this idea that, we're going to get Trump and it doesn't matter. It's like, yeah, but you're supposed to at least observe the format of how this works, right? Like people are supposed to at least pretend to have goodwill and good faith where this is concerned. And there's none of that here. Like they are jubilant. They are gleeful that they finally have managed to arrest Donald Trump for something. It doesn't matter that none of this is valid. It doesn't matter that there's no, criminal conduct here. It doesn't matter that the Pandora's box that they've opened, if the Republicans actually decide to emulate the Democrats and what we could do to their political class in places where we control, the district attorney's office and the courts. I mean, which frankly, I think ought to be done. I think it's time for Republican district attorneys in places where, where you can get a Republican judge should absolutely lay waste to the Democrats' political class, for everybody from city council members all the way up to cabinet officials. Next time Alejandro Mayorkas shows up in Texas, he ought to be arrested. He ought to be arrested and make him an accessory to all the fentanyl deaths in the state of Texas since January of 2021. You know, is that a bullshit legal theory? Yeah. So what? The process is the punishment. That's what this Trump indictment is teaching us. So let's fight back. As far as I'm concerned, we are now in the post-republic phase of American history. And in the post-republic, anything goes. So get to work. And maybe we can restore the republic when the other side realizes that there is such a thing as mutually assured destruction. Because nothing else has worked.
I'm going to go back to my thesis, which is, and I said this on Twitter, the Republicans hate Trump too. They want him gone. They want someone who they can puppet master. I mean, and so like this is a bipartisan thing. I really do believe that if the Republicans had any teeth or any desire to stop this sort of mayhem, they would, and they could, but they have no desire to do that because they want him gone so badly too. And
well, okay, I don't disagree, but let me at least interject this.
Yeah.
So DeSantis says last week that Florida would fight extradition to New York, right? If because you know he thinks that the indictment's invalid. He said all those were the things that the Trump people wanted DeSantis to say. And
well, so he should have said a week and a half earlier.
Maybe so, but I mean, like
he should have.
We can have that fight, whatever.
Stupid.
Perhaps, but he did say it. But he says it, and then Trump goes to New York anyway. So you know, and like that was my thing is like Trump's milking this too. Okay, so for different reasons,
but he's revealed. The thing is that somewhat like the CNN idiot talking heads were saying that he looks sad going in. Yeah, this is a terrible time for America.
Yeah,
and
the whole
Trump
country
knows
should be
this.
sad about this.
And he's illustrating I really feel like he's illustrating the absurdity with this absurdity. Like,
well, I mean, this is happening during Easter week. Do you not realize the freaking allegory that you're setting up here with this stupid indictment? Right? Yeah. I mean, it's like breathtaking the way this thing has been done. Anyway, but my point is, I think everybody's milking this. Okay, Trump's raised $7 million since the indictment came down. You know, the Secret Service is begging him, look, we're going to do this late at night. We're going to get this away. Like, oh no, I'm coming out of the car in front of God and everybody. I mean, we're going to make this as big a deal as we can. And I can't fault him for that. But the point is, they could have gone a totally different way. When DeSantis said, hey, Florida's going to fight extradition, Trump's people could have gone around to every red state governor and said, look, are you in with DeSantis? Because here's the deal. We're going to go everywhere but New York. And I'm going to basically shoot the bird at Alvin Bragg everywhere I go and say, hey, come get me. Right. And just gone all over the country and just talked about how, illicit this is and how illegitimate that whole thing in New York is and blah, blah, blah. Like he could have done that.
He could have, but it would have been stupid. I'm sorry. He's doing actually the right thing here. And from
I don't know. I'm not convinced of that.
From an optics point of view, the thing is about making this public, drawing attention to it, and making the covert over. If he was traveling around to state, they would have said that he was avoiding prosecution and this is a guilty man. But he is going into the teeth of this. If they convict him, even better. It will show how the rule of law means nothing. And this is the thing.
You do understand that they will convict him.
Oh, yes.
Like, you understand that, right?
Oh, absolutely. This is happening. They can't go back now.
Yeah.
No, they're in for a penny, in for a pound. They're done.
I mean, this is going to be a kangaroo court as bad as the one in federal court in New York and we should talk a little bit about this if we have time, that convicted Douglas Mackey.
Yeah.
who was the
Yeah.
blogger who did the joke
Right.
about how, hey, here's how you can text your vote for Hillary back in
Right.
2016,
Right.
which was hilarious.
Right.
And this guy has just been convicted in federal court in New York
Right.
City,
Facing
and
10
faces
years in
like 10
prison.
years in prison
Yeah.
for tweeting a joke. And you want to talk about the First Amendment? The First Amendment doesn't exist in this country anymore.
No.
And like, I don't remember who this Obama judge that presided over this conviction. You want to talk about like what the Republicans in the House ought to be doing? They ought to be impeaching this son of a bitch right now, because you can't. How do you not throw that case out of court altogether? Guy makes a meme on Twitter, and somehow he's going to get a federal conviction for like interfering with an election with a meme. Like, how can you even pretend to have free speech in a country where that happens? To me, that's
Republicans want him gone too. I keep saying this.
Mackey? I don't think
yes,
Republicans
they do not. They do not believe they have the same. They're just. It's a difference in degrees. They want MAGA gone. They want all of Trump supporters gone. They hated the Tea Party. They hate the people in the House who are the Freedom Caucus. McConnell has castrated any Freedom Caucusy person in the Senate. He co-opted them.
No doubt about that.
This is them too. They don't like the smelly little people. They think they're above them, and they are making tons of money at their expense. So this is, if they can, do they care about all of this tech stuff silencing conservatives? No. It only becomes a problem if it specifically affects them. And frankly, if they don't have to tweet, they will give up that freedom so that everyone else who's is trying to participate and get to the truth will have to be shut up too. I mean, this is none of this happens without Republicans. None of this happens without Mitch McConnell. None of this happens without a flaccid, corrupt right. And that's where we're at. So I don't know. I have, I like Jim Jordan. I think I liked Devin Nunes, not at first, but then I came to like him. And especially when I met him and everything, I was like, oh, this guy's a sincere guy. But they're the minority. They are the absolute minority. The majority of the Republicans view the people, the innocent people who came to January 6th and stood there and wanted their voices to be heard. They hate them and they fear them because they want to be able. The Republicans have never followed their platform. And until we, out in the hinterlands, get where things are at, we're going to constantly be disappointed. And Ron DeSantis is no savior either. He will get in office and he will be blackmailed and bullied into silence too. And will be in total war with Russia or something idiotic because of what the Democrats have started. So the only solution is individual and local, in my opinion, and move to where people are like-minded, because a lot of places are lost. You are not, as a conservative, ever going to get justice in a Democrat city. The ideas that we had of what America is, it's over. And it's really difficult to even just accept, but I think that's where we're at. And Trump is just, at this point, there's nothing that the people have to see it, and face it. And I think that's why he's doing what he's doing so publicly. I mean, that's just my 2 cents about it. And I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think that I am. And I think that the rule of law is a thing of the past. I just don't think that.
Well, that's clear, particularly in places where there's a Soros DA. I mean, just look at Alvin Bragg, right? I mean, this is a guy, you had a guy working in a bodega and this nut job shows up because his girlfriend was trying to steal whatever it was she was trying to steal. Guy says something about it. So this guy shows up and he's going to beat the living hell out of the bodega worker who, gets a drop on the guy and kills him, right? After he's been attacked. And, that guy spent a week in Rikers before public outcry sprung him and Bragg left him alone. The other thing is this guy's a parking lot attendant. It was a week ago or something. Gets shot twice by some guy, trying to get, I guess, the money out of the cash register from the little parking attendant booth. And he manages to get the gun away from the guy and shoot him. Doesn't kill him, but, so they, paramedics come and take them both to the hospital. And Bragg's going to prosecute this guy for attempted murder. He gets shot twice. Takes the gun away and shoots his attacker. And he's the one gets charged. And the answer is that New York is, if you saw, what is it? The Dark Knight Rises, I guess it was, Bane takes over Gotham.
Right.
Right. And the cops are, stuck in the sewer and the criminals come in and they take over the town. Like that is what New York City is. That is what Philadelphia is. That is what LA is. It is what San Francisco is. Okay. Portland, Seattle, every place where there was a Soros DA, Chicago. All right. New Orleans, the criminals are in charge. Okay. And if you live there, then, I hate to tell you, you need a gun. Problem is that if you use it, you're taking your life into your hands because they will absolutely prosecute you and they will throw you in a holding cell with all of those people. And when they see you coming, they will absolutely have at you. And you may die in jail. You may get the living hell beat out of you. You may have to kill somebody in jail just to stay alive. And then they'll prosecute you for that. Okay. So, why you're in that city, I have no idea. Because all you can do is keep your head down. You're not actually a citizen when you live in those places because you don't have the right to vote. You're going to vote a certain way and your candidate's going to get 10%, right? And the other 90% is going to go toward people who hate you and will persecute you. So get the hell out of there and move to the suburbs if you know it's good for you. And if those suburbs are in a blue state, even that's not good enough.
Right.
But the real question is this. And maybe you can't fix anything through Congress. But the real question is this: if you live in a red state, what are you willing to do to create this space between you and those other people? Are you willing to make the economic separation from the blue states? Are you willing to have, pressure your public officials into doing things that make your life better at the expense of the blue states? Like that's this whole idea. And just as an update, for the last 2 weeks, my guy who's running, Holliday, who's running for the state legislature down here, who came up with this idea of banishing the criminals, is raising money off the idea. He's got people coming to him, dude, I heard about your deal. Like there's enthusiasm about that plan. And I figured there would be. It's off the charts. Like this is actually probably getting elected to the legislature because people are fed up. And the way they see this is like, yeah, absolutely. Put those people on a freaking bus to New York City and let the New Yorkers who freaking pander to criminals, let them pander to our people. And we'll get rid of them. That's how you solve the crime problem, is to get rid of the criminals.
Some of that self-selection seems to be happening. I saw a chart earlier today and I didn't have a long chance to look at it, but the incoming San Francisco has reversed the loss of population, but I'm just wondering if they're just gaining more of these kind of criminal types who are looking for the monthly payments and stuff. And so that kind of self-selection, one guy they interviewed with the Associated Article said, well, in Texas, I don't get $838 or something a month. I don't get free healthcare. I don't get all of these different like goodies. And I get bothered all the time because you're not allowed to sleep in a tent on the sidewalk. But here in San Francisco, I can, and he was a fentanyl dealer. He had sold fentanyl to a 15-year-old in San Francisco. Yeah. And so he could carry on with his criminal enterprise unmolested.
Yeah. Well, and that's the whole point, right? Like you can steal up to $1,000 worth of stuff and they won't prosecute you.
Right.
So until there are no more stores to steal from, they're going to keep doing it.
Right.
Like a friend of mine was just there and he actually watched it happen.
Oh,
And
yeah.
like talks to the manager of the store who's like, it's really nothing I can do. I can yell at him, and I'm sitting like, what we need is, Chaz Palminteri from a Bronx Tale, right? When they have the bikers come into his bar
Yeah.
and want to act like an asshole. And then he locks the door. He says, now you just can't leave. Right.
Right.
I mean, like that's what you need. But, if you did that, then it would be the store manager that gets carted off to jail.
Right.
So, like, okay, fine. So if that's how it's going to be, then y'all can stew in your juices. Right. We will take all of the economic activity out of your city. We will take all of the productive citizens out of your city. We will bring them to our red state or our red suburbs or whatever it might be. And we will cut you off. Because the number one thing that needs to happen, and this is a congressional thing, and it's going to take way more balls than Republicans have, but at some point it's going to come to this, is we're going to get rid of all those economic development block grants that go to blue cities. We're going to zero that out. Billions of dollars we're going to save. And now you're going to have a tax base. And guess what? You've run it off. So what are you going to do? Well, you're going to sit there and whine about how your city is dying. And it's like, screw you. You killed it. The suburbs are doing great because all the productive people live there. And at some point, this is what the score is going to be. And you will have a Republican Party that understands it. I think a lot of people do. They just don't have the nutsack to actually make it happen. But it's not that hard. Well, we're in the middle of a burgeoning budget crisis. And, Phil Wegman at Real Clear had a whole thing of Biden's administration. Well, we can't negotiate with the Republicans until they negotiate with themselves, the answer is like, yeah, but you're not willing to negotiate any spending cuts in return for a debt ceiling increase. Right. That's an unreasonable position. And so the answer should be, okay, fine. Here's the Republican budget that goes to war over Democrat, blue cities and blue states and zeroes them out. We're not funding any of it. How you like them apples? We'll start with that. And now you can start begging us for this funding and we'll make you negotiate it against yourselves. That's how this should work. And I know there's people in the Freedom Caucus in the House that are talking in that language and everybody else is like, I don't know if we can do that. No, you have to do it. Right. Okay, you have to, because the alternative is you're going to cave on the debt ceiling, and for another couple of years, there will be no progress made on the budget. We'll go from $33 trillion to $36 trillion or whatever it is, and eventually you're going to be Greece because the world is starting to give up on the dollar as its reserve currency. Okay, the Saudis are now going to be trading in oil with China and taking yuan instead of dollars. And that's the camel's nose under the tent. Pardon the pun, or don't, I don't care. But the point is, you are now in a situation where all of this is going to start breaking down. And the only salvation for the country from an economic and financial standpoint is to start balancing that budget and try to make a dent in the federal freaking debt. Which
Janet Yellen says everything is fine. I don't know why you're so upset, Scott.
Moron. Okay, John Kennedy and Ted Cruz both made Janet Yellen look like a blithering idiot. And we actually, I think Kurt Schlichter was in your place last week. We talked about this a little bit. So Janet Yellen's position is that the Biden budget lowers the debt by $3 trillion because over the next 10 years, it goes from 33 trillion in debt to 51 trillion in debt, but it would be 54 trillion, but for the Biden budget. Okay. This is actually the line of bullshit that woman is the Treasury Secretary who used to run the Fed is running in the U.S. Senate. And of course, Kennedy annihilated her. Ted Cruz annihilated her too. I mean, everybody, all the Republicans did. Okay. Annihilated her. I mean, the idea that you could add $18 trillion to the federal debt over the next 10 years and call that a responsible, sustainable, a federal budget that makes progress when it spends $500 billion more next year than it's spending this year, when there's a $1.7 trillion federal deficit. Okay.
Well, and the thing
and these are the people that run the country. The answer is you need to cut this budget down to the bone. And I will make allowances for what these people think is politically possible and what is not. The first thing that you cut is all of the Democrat stuff. You make them suffer. The budget starts in the House, so you zero out the Democrats in every blue city, in every blue state, in every blue county that you can. You zero them out and you say, nope, you got to raise your own money because we're not giving you any more federal freaking largesse. Deal with it. I'm not saying Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. I'm not saying that. Those things are harder. The easy stuff is the block grants. The easy stuff is these shitty programs that are designed just to give away money to people who are Democrats, special interest group members, and nonprofits, and all these other parasites on the federal teat. Okay, dump all of that. Make sure none of that gets funded in the budget that you send back to Biden.
Okay, so
it's not that hard. It really isn't.
Well, the thing is it's hard if you're a Republican. I mean, so they make Yellen look
It's hard
stupid.
if you're a bad politician.
Well,
that's what it is.
Well, yeah. The Yellen. I mean, I feel like the sky is going to fall any minute. Every time that Krugman, Kramer, and Yellen say everything is fine, it is invariably about to turn to crap. And so I sit there and I'm like, just shut up. Stop saying it's going to be okay. I read, 100 since the SVB bank failure, Americans have taken 125 billion out of their bank accounts.
Banks. Right.
Yeah. So clearly Americans don't think everything is fine
in their bank account and have taken it out, because that would actually be smart. Right.
Say that again.
Have more than 250. Well, hopefully it's people with more than $250,000 in the bank that are taking it out.
Yeah, maybe. I mean that, but I bet a lot of regular people because the thing is, if the whole thing goes tits up, which is possible at this point with this stupidity that's running things right now, the FDIC can exist, but can it guarantee every, bank in America? Not unless they're willing to, print meaningless dollars and turn us into Venezuela. So, I mean, they might be willing to do that. Hey, okay. So you mentioned
don't even start with the might. That's what they would try to do. The question is whether you exactly can keep the presses rolling fast enough.
Right. Yeah. So in one of the few loyal Republicans, much to many chagrin, has been Marjorie Taylor-Green. She's surrounded by a mob in New York right now. And I think might have been driven away because probably her security was too afraid because they were just absolutely mobbed there. But this last week, she had an interview with Leslie Stahl. And I saw a couple of clips of it. I'm sure you did too.
I have a thing up at the American Spectator about it today.
Okay. And the problem is, I think for most Republicans, is that Marjorie Taylor-Green is actually kind of leading the way for how they should communicate with the media. And one thing that she understands that they seem to not to is that she is already the devil incarnate to the media. And so she interacts with them in a realistic way. She interacts with them in a way that she understands how they feel about her. And so she communicates back to them with that foundational understanding, which makes her sound vitriolic sometimes. But I think she's actually just being rational.
Well, to put it another way, she has as much contempt for them as they have for her.
Oh, right.
Which most of these things are like, no, I can make friends with the media. And it's like,
Right.
she's been treated badly enough that she's like, okay, so I know how bad this is going to be. Right. And the thing is like Leslie Stahl has burned so many Republicans with these slanted, crappy interviews that she does.
Right.
And the thing of the all-time, I guess, greatest was, she's interviewing Trump in October of 2010, and it's a hit piece interview, and so Trump has his own people film it, and then Thursday before the Sunday that 60 Minutes airs, he releases the entire thing, and steals her thunder, and like you basically see how slanted the piece in 60 Minutes was. And at that point, basically all the Republicans stopped doing Leslie Stahl interviews because who would do it? Marjorie Taylor-Green on Sunday is like, yeah, I'll do it. Why not? Right. Like, I know how bad this is going to be, but I don't care. And for the most part, it was a complete disaster, but there were highlights, right? So, and they wouldn't put it on their air, but the piece about Ukraine, where, she's like, well, I'm not for giving, these people this endless supply of money. I'm for us going to the peace table and making peace. Oh, but you can't give away part of Ukraine to Putin and that rewards it. She's like, they're not the 51st state, right? I mean, look, we're 32 trillion in debt. Like, we've got all these different things. Our border is a disaster. We've got way bigger problems than Ukraine, and I don't want to spend any more money on something that's not our problem, right? Which I'm not saying that's the majority of the American opinion on Ukraine now. In 6 months, it absolutely will be.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure it's not the majority position now.
I don't know that we could know that accurately because everything is so skewed. Like if you ask,
I haven't seen any polling on it. I haven't. So let me put it this way. I haven't seen any polling that phrased the question appropriately, which is, is Joe Biden correct when he talks about doing whatever it takes for Ukraine to win that war, or would we be better off just securing as advantageous a peace treaty as possible and then moving on to other things? I think if you ask the poll question that way, you're going to get more for the latter position than the unlimited help for Ukraine position. But I don't know of a pollster that's even done that question. Maybe somebody has, and tell us in the comments if you've seen it.
Yeah.
But like the point is, she takes that position that I think is probably a majority position, and Leslie Stahl acts like Marjorie Taylor-Green has just spouted a third eye on the top of her head. It's like, oh, you can't, and it's like, no, actually. And she's like, well, what's wrong with making peace? Why do we have to have war all the time? And the producers at 60 Minutes are like, that shit doesn't make CBS's air.
Right.
Right. And so they put it on YouTube, and it's the, 60 Minutes plus thing. And it's like, oh, yeah. Hopefully nobody will watch this, but we can say that we at least released it.
Right.
But the thing that really won the day for Marjorie Taylor-Green was when Leslie Stahl's like, you said Democrats are a bunch of pedophiles.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah. She's like, you're sexualizing children. That's what pedophiles do. Right.
Right.
And there's this great tweet from Scott Adams, right? The creator of Dilbert, who has been canceled for making a pretty reasoned argument, which is, there's this poll question that somebody asked that basically got a really bad answer from Black respondents about white people. And he said, well, if this poll question is accurate, if these responses are accurate, then white people should stay away from Black people because they're out to get them. And for that, he was canceled. And it's like, okay, nobody has a sense of humor anymore. Nobody is willing to think out of the box. This guy gets canceled for making a point, which is to chide the respondents of that poll question, right? It's like, look, if you believe this, then don't be mad when other people decide they want to stay away from you because you're not helping, right? Like, that's what he was saying. For that, he gets canceled. So Scott Adams is like basically red pilled at this point. And he says, he tweets when he sees this clip, he's like, I've been laughing for the last 10 minutes about this. He's like, I have told Republicans for, a couple of years, don't call the Democrats pedophiles. I'm wrong. He's like, I'm wrong. They should absolutely do it. Forget about the facts. If you're going to get called racist all day long, call them pedophiles. And of course, I do a whole thing in the Spectator about this, because it's like, it's no less unfair than the freaking racism charge against Republicans. When James Carville, who is a dyed-in-the-wool racist, is going around calling Republicans racist, there are no rules, okay? This is all about, yes, it's a shot below the belt. Those are all the shots in American politics now, okay? They're all below the belt. And oh, by the way, this one isn't that below the belt.
I was just going to say,
who the president is.
How below the belt is it to note that
it's not?
It's that what kind of a psychopath sits there and says it's that encourages trannies dancing in front of babies? Like, we're not even talking toddlers.
Right.
Why is this even? What are we doing here?
I mean, okay. So how many Republicans, other than David French, how many Republicans are pushing this? Not that many. It's all Democrats pushing it. Right. Who's filling up the school libraries with gay porn?
Right.
Ain't Republicans. It's Democrats. Who elected a guy president who showered with his 12-year-old daughter? And we know this is true because it was in her diary that you get arrested by the feds if you're in possession of, which proved that it was her diary, by the way. Okay. Right. And it's not even that you need that evidence, because all you got to do is watch the video clips of this guy creeping on everybody else's kids.
Yeah.
That doesn't bother Democrats in the least. They had 25 candidates in 2020 and they picked a pedophile to nominate. So you know what? Screw you. You are a bunch of pedophiles. By the same standard you call Republicans racist, okay?
Well, no,
by believing in Martin Luther King's colorblind society.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And you're going to call us that? Guess what? There's no level that's off limits at this point. And this has some meat on its bones. So good for Marjorie Taylor-Green that she was willing to go there. And Leslie Stahl's reaction when she basically just said, yeah, it is the pedophile part. She's like, wow. And it's like, okay,
right.
You're right. Because we've been saying that shit to y'all calling us racist for 25 or 30 years. And you know what? That doesn't work. Okay. Right. So, yeah, I think every single Republican running for office ought to be calling their Democrat opponent, if not a pedophile, then pedophile adjacent. Or if you want to call them groomers, if you want to call them groomers, call them groomers. I'm fine with that, because at the end of the day, you're sexualizing kids. You want to teach them about alternative exotic sexualities when they're 5. Okay. Yeah. They don't understand any of that shit. And no, this is how you broaden their horizons, right? And this is how you keep people from growing up as homophobes and transphobes. Like, that's a 5-year-old. They don't know about sex, and you shouldn't be teaching them about that. Right. That makes you a pedophile adjacent, groomer, whatever you want to call. You're a wacko if you do that to kids. And this is not some crazy position. This is standard, like, civilization. It's not even American traditional. This is 5,000 years of civilization. You don't do that to kids. And Democrats think it's a civil rights issue if you don't. Okay. Right. Like, if that's who you are and that's the agenda that you're pushing, I'm going to call you everything under the sun, and I'm going to feel fine about it, because you are that bad and you do deserve it. And if the Democrats don't like it, guess what, guys? The road is wide open for you to prove that you're not a pedophile, which is to stop pushing this agenda. All right? Call these people out. Stop putting the drag queens on the country music television awards show. Okay? Like,
okay, I don't know. Hey, Scott, I don't know anything about country music. Who was the singer who was singing with them?
It's Kelsey Ballerini or something. As far as I know, she's not actually really a country singer, right? Like, she's just a singer who happens to do country. She's not country. There's nothing about her that's country. You know, but anyway, yeah, they put her out there, and they started with some kind of gun grabbing thing on this. And this is not the Country Music Association Awards. This is CMT, the cable channel that nobody watches, that
Right.
did
Okay.
this. And it's all the same crap. It's some woke, multinational corporation that owns this channel, right? And they're going to put that out there, and it's, oh, this is how we stay relevant. And it's all about selling ads to, ad agencies on Madison Avenue. It's not about the audience. This has nothing whatsoever to do with what the public wants. The public has zero interest in watching a bunch of freaking drag queens stomping around on TV. There's every time one of these things is put in front of the public in a way, like, does it draw an audience? Does it not? Okay. Every time they make a movie about this, any of that crap, all of it loses money. It's all a disaster. Okay.
Right.
Bud Light just gave a freaking endorsement deal to this Dylan Mulvaney, this freaking nut job. And from what I understand, there are now distributors, Anheuser-Busch distributors, like, we're out. Which,
well, I was like, this was I
don't know that actually pans out, but
I was like, this is insane. Did you see the Kid Rock? Is it? Yeah, Kid Rock. Is that one? Yeah. Should use his gun to shoot the Bud Light. He was just so pissed. And but it's awesome. Like, the thing is like, this has got to stop. Nobody wants this. I was reading some research about like the Amazon Prime, and they were saying how they they are really, really heavy data dependent, of course, because they're a data company. And when they do all this research, they find out that things like Reacher, the show that Chris, what's his name? I forget, but anyways, another
you're talking about Chris Pratt's show on Amazon, which is not Reacher. It's
The Kill List or something.
The Contractor. I think it's The Contractor. I don't remember the name of the show.
Anyway, but I watched both of them because I have a teenage son, and they're good, and they're doing really, really well. And all of the kind of wokish projects don't do so well. And so they were complaining that a lot of really good, meaningful things get killed because the money isn't following the heart. They're going by the data. And I'm like, the data makes the money, you idiots. This woke stuff, nobody's watching it, and nobody wants to watch it. And, so it's just like, stop it. And the thing is, like, in Reacher in particular, it had a multi-culti kind of cast, and the premise was, whatever. But this is somehow a problem for the artists, Anyway.
Yeah.
So, okay, speaking of, I'm going to take a kind of a turn to Louisiana and talk about women's basketball, which generally speaking is treated like a joke. But there was a big final in the March Madness that spilled over into April, female basketball championship. And there was some controversy around that. And our producer is from Iowa, Kate. Hello. And Scott is from Louisiana. And I come from the perspective of being a female basketball player in high school. And then when I went to college and grad school, I played like on, leagues. And in grad school, I played with the guys because there weren't enough girls who wanted to play. So I ended up playing with the boys and reffing with the boys and all that. And I saw the controversy. I saw the, hand in the face thing, and the problem with it. And I came from a high school team where pretty much trash talking was an art form. I was trying to explain to my kids about how trash talking was just interwoven into the game of basketball. It is part of basketball. And they would be probably appalled at some of their mother's behavior on the basketball court. And and also I think about some of the things that were said and done both ways, But what was particularly offensive in some people's minds in this game was the winner rubbing it in so far after the final buzzer, after winning, and just kind of being
stalking,
disrespectful and whatever. So I wanted to get your guys' opinion about that. I mean, I have my own opinion about this. But Kate, what are your thoughts? Because I think your thoughts are the thoughts of a lot of different commentators, at least.
Yeah. So, okay, first of all, I'm not a fan of the let John Cena do it. I'm like, I'm not a fan of it from anyone.
You're not a fan of trash talking and getting in.
Trash talk all you want. It's specifically the John Cena, don't see me. I'm kind of like,
that bothers you.
I'm not the biggest fan of it. So I'm just saying, I don't like it when Caitlin Clark does it. I don't like it when LeBron, I don't know who else does it, but so just my disclaimer. So I'm like, when people are saying that they do the same thing, I don't like it from anyone. So the thing is Caitlin Clark does it. And she also, has the probably biggest range, 3-point wise, of any basketball player currently, men or women's. I haven't seen a lot of men even pull the range that she does. I mean, she's the hottest basketball star right now. I mean, she's gotten all the TV attention. And LSU won fair and square. I'll give them that also. I could rant about the refs and the fouls on both teams, but I'll leave that for another day. But yeah, so at the end, and LSU was up the whole game. By the fourth quarter, it was pretty obvious Iowa was going to lose. Also, disclaimer, I don't know if you can see, I'm an Iowa grad, so full disclaimer, there's bias here. But so like you said, Angel Reese, who is a sophomore, so I don't know if she's a redshirt sophomore or just a real sophomore.
She's a sophomore. Yeah.
So she follows Caitlin around, getting probably within 3 to 4 feet of her, doing this, I got the ring, just totally being over the top, in my opinion. And so there's a lot of controversy about, well, Caitlin does it, so it's the same thing, they're doing the same thing. Oh, now you're just saying it because Caitlin's white. Oh, yada yada yada. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why people think that it's wrong. It's not. I think, and Dave Portnoy, who, another controversial figure, because why not? I think he said it really well, where we have never seen someone in any kind of championship game follow around another player like that. What Caitlin does is in the moment. It's after she hits a 3. It's, when she has the crowd going. It's, during the game, and rarely, I'm not going to say it's never, rarely directed at a specific player. Usually at her bench or something, or even at the crowd to get them going. So yeah, I just I wasn't a fan of the whole following her around thing. I thought it was very classless. If that's not a characteristic that you desire to have, then so be it. If you don't care to be classy, then you don't care to be classy. But I think that it was a really good basketball game. Again, I could go off about the refs. I think that women's basketball got a really good spotlight. I love to see the college women's game getting more attention. I think I don't even know if the tournament topped 1 million viewers for women's last year, and we were at 9.9 million for the final. So I mean, in summary, I'm super excited for Iowa, but I think LSU could have won a little bit better.
All right, Scott, what do you
Scott,
think?
what's your take?
Okay. I'm with you on the excessive taunting at the end of the game. I didn't like it either. I thought it was a little much. Having said that, and having played, I didn't play college, but I did play high school. I can tell you that if you haven't played basketball, you probably ought to shut up about trash talking, period, because that is the game. Okay. Yeah. Baseball is fans heckling players because you want to get in everybody's head. Okay. Football is basically fighting and physically dirty play because you can get away with it in, in the line of scrimmage and so forth. And basketball is running your mouth from the beginning of the game to the end of the game and probably even beyond. Okay. So there's that aspect of it that everybody's throwing a fit over, what is classless, but some of this is like, if you're at a basketball game and you're sitting front row and it's, a major college game or an NBA game or whatever, it's not the same thing as watching the game on TV. Because if you're sitting in the, Jack Nicholson seats and you can actually hear the stuff that these guys will say to each other, okay, it's nothing like what the camera picks up.
And what's being said to the players by guys on the bench and by the fans behind the bench to the players.
No question about it. Although I would say that you get more of that in baseball than you get in basketball, because in baseball there are quiet periods where they can hear every word. All right. Whereas in basketball, it's attenuated to some extent. Yeah. The point being that horrifically nasty trash talking is a feature of the game. Has always, when they were using peach baskets, it was a feature of the game. And if you think that this is something that you should have overriding or spoiling the actual competition of the game, then probably don't even bother. Now, having said all that, I think there are a couple of things that are at play. Number one, both Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese have amassed massive numbers of social media followers in the aftermath of all this. And the social media following is mother's milk. It is gold when you are trying to sign an NIL deal, because that is the primary means by which you are able to generate the audience for your name, image, and likeness in front of certain people. I mean, LSU's got another athlete, Livy Dunn, who's a gymnast, who is worth millions of dollars because of essentially running an OnlyFans on Instagram and TikTok. And she's gorgeous, give her all that. But like, if you think what Angel Reese did is classless, then you probably don't want to see Livy Dunn. So anyway, like, there's a method. You can say, oh, this is, classless and she's a hood and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, she's monetizing this in a way that's available to her that, like anybody who's her agent would tell her that. The other piece to this is that all of the people who are making this into a major controversy are doing more for women's basketball than they ever thought they could. And this is going to come off because I'm the guy in this argument and I'm going to be the sexist when I say this. Women's basketball, and I mean, look, history proves me out on this. Women's basketball has to have, at the college and the WNBA level, has to have a certain WWE nature to it, okay? The game in and of itself, and everybody talks about the LSU Iowa game, which as a women's basketball game is about as good a ball game as you will ever see. It was really objectively a fantastic game compared to the next night you had UConn and San Diego State, which as men's college championship games go was an absolute snoozer of a game. Having said that, the level of play in the UConn San Diego State game was so much greater than the LSU Iowa game. It's not even funny. And I'm not saying that to be pejorative, but the physicality and the athleticism and the speed of the defenses playing in the UConn and San Diego State game made the game boring because it was so freaking hard to get a shot off. Okay. And in saying that, I'm not trying to demean the women's game at all. I'm just trying to say that the game itself in men's basketball, particularly at the, end of the NCAA, the Final Four level, the NBA level, or whatever, the athleticism is so great that it stands on its own. Compared to that, the women's game needs something extra. Okay. So that's why Kim Mulkey wears these outrageous outfits on the sideline. That's why you have some of this, over the top trash talking, is because the women's basketball has got to build a brand to get, the audience and the money into the game that it needs. And it's hard to do that when, your players are not going to dunk basketballs. Right. And yeah, there's great 3-point shooting. The ball is a lot smaller and the line is in. So you should have good 3-point shooting. And shooting is what women do, right?
Okay,
that's what you can do.
Scott, so
My point is this. It's salesmanship that's at work here. Mm-hmm. And it is what it is. And, it may not be your cup of tea, but if you think that Marcus of Queensberry rules is what's going to get women's basketball growing, first of all, that's not American culture as it is now. And second of all, how long are they supposed to wait to grow the game? And that's why you have what you have.
Okay. So I played basketball back in the 80s when they changed the ball. When I first played, and it was in my sophomore or junior year, they transitioned from because men and women played with the same ball. Mm-hmm. And then they transitioned to a smaller ball for women. I don't know. It had to be around maybe 85, 84, 85.
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. And so, and it took everybody a season or so to get used to it because we were used to the bigger balls. And, one of the things is that men have gotten increasingly taller and taller and taller in basketball. The average height has increased. There were always some outliers, but there were no Yao Mings. And, these kind of extraordinary freaks of nature, really.
It's not even that. 20 years ago, a college team going to the Final Four, I mean, the guards were 6'1", 6'2".
Yep.
Go look at UConn last night. All their guards are 6'5" and 6'6". The short guy that they brought out there was Joey Calcaterra off the bench. He's 6'4".
Right. So my point with that being is that with the basket height hasn't changed. And so the men's game has changed because physicality, power, all of the different strength training that basketball players do now didn't used to be done. Things have changed dramatically with the game, but yet the parameters of the game for men have not changed. And so they're taller. It's easier for them to hit a shot. It's easier for them to dunk. It's easier for them to do everything, really. And so where does the game change? Speed, power, all the things that you're talking about, Scott.
Defense. Defense is the difference. If you watch a college game, like those great Houston teams with Olajuwon and Drexler, and Villanova beats Georgetown when they're not even remotely supposed to,
right?
Basically, because they hit open shots from outside,
right?
I mean, you play like San Diego State, UConn didn't have those shots. I mean. Right. Like those guys D'd up. They were in their faces all game long, and it was hard to make shots. So yeah.
Well, okay, so that has changed. What I see when you're watching women's basketball is really the game that used to be played. Yeah. Because women have gotten taller too, but they're not taller than the average man was, but like in the 80s or anything. And the game has sped up for women. The skill has gotten better, but it's been in proportion to the men. And now what you're seeing in a women's college team, not the WNBA, because they let them walk and do all kinds of bull crap that drives me insane. But you're seeing more of a traditional basketball game as it once was. Now, as far as like the trash talking and stuff goes, that's part of the game. And after the game stuff, I mean, I wish that the NBA would go back to the way it used to be, where teammates people hated each other. I grew up in the years where the winners and the losers didn't go out to dinner afterwards. You weren't best friends with anybody on the opposing team. Magic and Bird didn't like each other. Jordan hated everybody, and everyone hated Jordan because he's an asshole. And, you know, and talk about
the Detroit Pistons used to get in fights.
Yeah.
Because you had, you know, Bill Laimbeer and Jeff Ruland. I mean, these guys were, you know, more thuggish than anybody that's playing now.
Yes, absolutely.
But it was a brand, right? Like the Pistons were a really good team and everybody hated them because they were nasty.
Well, but the thing is the hatred between teams was not theoretical. It was not between players. It was not a made up thing. It was genuine. And me as a fan, I loved it. Yeah. Frankly, I hope Iowa and LSU hate each other, and I hope they beat. You know what we used to do in high school? There was a team that would file their nails, their long nails, to points to scratch the other team. I'm not even joking. The stuff that was said. I went in one time because I was like the 6th, 7th man on the team. And we had a state championship team, and we were a team that couldn't exist now because we were short and we were fast and we were incredible on defense. And so it was kind of like that Villanova team, you know, that beat Georgetown. That doesn't happen anymore. Everybody's tall. It wouldn't even be a thing. And my whole purpose going in, I told my kids this, was to take out the star of the other team. I was playing defense on her and I elbowed her so hard. I thought I was going to get teed up. I didn't. I bodied her so hard and purposefully. And I was a tiny little thing, but we were flying around that. And twice, I think I got three fouls in like 5 or 6 minutes. It was insane. But that was my whole purpose, was to throw her off the game.
That's what you do when you come off the bench. You're 5 fouls.
Right. I mean, that's
exactly your job, right? If you can draw a couple fouls on the other guy and get them out of the game, and that's what the bench is for. It was the strategy. And so like I do, I appreciate a good competition. I appreciate hatred of your opponent after the game. I appreciate all those things. Stalking somebody around, what I have to tell you guys, you know what my response was the white girl, is it Caitlin? Is that her name? I was like, the fact that she didn't haul off and punch that girl, because back in my day, that's what would have happened. There would have been a laying out fight.
She said she didn't even notice at the time, and she was just trying to get to the handshake line. I don't know if that's...
Well, I don't know either, but like that kind of taunting, that would earn you a knuckle sandwich for sure, or a good elbow to the face. I was kind of surprised that, you know, at her self-control and not taking it to her. But the really great athletes ignore that and come back and, you know, like a Larry Bird, if she turns out to be like a Larry Bird, but for women, white, tall women, just punishes you on the court. Over and over again. That's Larry Bird was a legendary trash talker. Oh, he's the worst.
I mean, Larry Bird was like, you know, all of these other guys. And I mean, all of these players from the 80s and 90s who are, you know, lionized as, you know, the golden age of the game. And these guys are these great figures, you know, and they were, but Bird and Dr. J and Magic and Isaiah Thomas and Jordan and Kevin McHale and Hakeem Olajuwon and all, Shaq, Barkley, massive trash talkers. And I mean, those guys got in shoving matches all the time. You know, if they had a microphone on the things that these guys would say to each other, that would make Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark look like nothing. I mean, so the idea that, you know,
okay, you know what? So wait, Scott, I got to just say one thing because you reminded me of something. All of the guys who you mentioned were so bad that Joe Dumars, who is the sweetest guy, he had the reputation just for being sweet. Everybody else was terrible on all the teams, all the players
They
you
played
mentioned.
on the Pistons.
And he was
I mean,
on the Pistons.
Played on the nastiest team in basketball. So
And he was
yeah, I
just
mean, he really didn't have
such
to be
a
that sweet to
sweetheart
be
of
the
a
sweet guy
guy.
on that team.
And had a reputation, and he stood out because he wasn't like everybody else. So it's the game.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And, look, I think this is whether it was staged for this purpose or whether it's just working out this way, I'm going to be agnostic about. But the fact of the matter is, we have spent however many minutes talking about women's basketball today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We didn't do that. I mean, we weren't doing the podcast last year. We wouldn't have done it last year.
Yeah.
So, and of course, the addition to this is that yesterday, we're doing this on Tuesday, so Monday, Jill Biden, who was at the game, then says, oh, normally we invite the champion to the White House, but we should invite Iowa too. And it's like, look how stupid you are. You are as dumb as your husband. And of course, the Iowa kids are insulted by this.
Oh,
right. It's like, what is this? A participation trophy? Screw you, lady. And of course, Angel Reese, who's like, hey, I'm already a lightning rod, so I might as well let it fly. She freaking tweets a joke, right? Which, okay, maybe she was wrong with the John Cena thing, but she definitely wasn't wrong about this.
It is a joke.
And even it got so bad that Nancy Armour, who is this hardcore leftist that writes for USA Today and does sports stuff, tore up Jill Biden. I mean, tore her up, talking about, like, this is a massive insult to both LSU and Iowa. And the whole thing, and it's like, leave it to the Bidens to like
make
come along.
mad.
Oh, here's something we can poop on it and make it worse. And they did.
So what's Iowa going to do? Because there is no way in hell I would show up at the White House after coming in second. I would be insulted.
Well, there was a joke, and I don't know where this came from, but I saw it somewhere and I didn't see the attribution to it. But the joke is that Trump has then all of a sudden invited LSU to Mar-a-Lago.
That would actually be great.
Oh, I mean, it would be so perfect if LSU showed up. And here's Trump, and he's giving Angel Reese, who's at the big trucker baseball cap under that over that massive hair, and it's a MAGA hat. I mean, like that would blow everyone's mind so bad. And the thing about it is, like, and it's kind of, the word is already out. Kim Mulkey's like big conservative, She 2 years ago when she got the job at LSU, it was in the middle of COVID, right? It was like early 2021. And like, so everybody had to wear a mask, and like, she's wearing the mask, and she takes them. She says, I don't need that, throws it away and starts doing her opening press conference. And of course, all the media in the state, whoa, you can't take your mask off. She's like, yeah, you can tell, go screw yourself. She's pretty outspoken. And like when Brittany Griner, who played for her at Baylor, got arrested in Russia, Kim Mulkey was like, had nothing to say, and they ripped her. Oh, how can you not defend your player? And it's like, because I'm a little embarrassed by Brittany Griner, frankly. And so she like kept quiet, and so now they're calling her a homophobe. And like, I can't remember what her name is. The kind of chubby girl on ESPN who says stupid things, Sarah Spain. Saturday, I guess it was, whatever, rips Kim Mulkey about the outfits that she's wearing. Oh, she's got to wear sparkly outfits to hide the fact that she's a homophobe, right? And I mean, she got ratioed so fast on Twitter when she said that. But the point is, like, there's this sports media that there's two things about them. Number one, massively woke, more woke than the political media is.
Yeah.
Okay. That's number one. Generally speaking, because these are the reporters and pundits who are not as good as the political people. And so they try even harder, right? That's one thing. And the other thing is, all they want to do is generate controversy. It's not enough to actually talk about the game, right? And you can see this on ESPN, which is covered with morons. I mean, they've got to do like a political debate about every, who's the greatest player in Kansas City Chiefs history. And now we're going to have a knockdown, drag out fight over that. And it's like, okay, Lynn Dawson was good and, Mahomes is good. Like, so what? Why is it a competition? Well, because we've got to get, clicks. And it's like, no, you've ruined the coverage of the thing. Like ESPN is notorious for this. Talk to any sports fan, they'll tell you, oh, God, I can't stand ESPN. I'll watch the games, but I can't stand the talk shows because it's nonstop arguing about things that people really don't want to argue about. Right.
You know what? Scott, you know what? All the talk shows should be like what Charles Barkley and Shaq have going, where it's just funny.
Absolutely.
And it's a good time to watch whatever they're yapping
Those guys
about.
And Kenny Smith and
Ken
Kellogg and Ernie and when CBS has Jim Nance. And I mean, it's a bunch of friends. They do commercials together with Spike Lee. And like the whole thing is like, hey, we noticed that you're here for a good time. So we're going to show you a good time. And ESPN hasn't the faintest clue about that. The only place on any of ESPN's networks that you'll actually see that is you guys are not going to be watching college baseball, but when ESPN does college baseball coverage and they get Kyle Peterson and Ben McDonald, who both were, big time college pitchers. McDonald pitched for the Orioles for years and years. And those are just like funny guys. And they're really kind of understated in the way they talk about the game. There's no arguing or any of that. They're just telling stories. Right. And it is hilarious listening to these guys because it's all self-deprecating, stuff. And they really add to they know about the game and they will talk about, hey, this guy's batting stance, this is what it's for. They'll do all that. But when it's kind of downtime and they're just kind of filling, it's entertaining as can be. It's hilarious.
Right.
But it's totally different from everything else ESPN does in sports coverage. Which is all, we get more clicks when we set people against each other and have these fights. Right. And this is what this whole thing with Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese is all about, is to try to gin this crap up, which I think on balance helps the women's game. It doesn't help sports. Okay. Like this thing would have been better from a sportsmanship standpoint, from a love of the game standpoint, if everybody would have looked at the, this and said, I don't really like that, and then moved on. Right. But they can't move on because it gets clicks. Right. And that, some of that is just American culture. I don't like it. I understand it. And I'm not going to say Angel Reese is a thug or whatever for doing that, because I think, there's probably some calculated motives behind this. And there's probably some emotion behind it too, because as I understand, and the camera didn't really pick this up, Caitlin Clark and Alexis Morris, who is LSU's point guard that was guarding her the whole game, were like this the whole game long. And like really nasty things were said. And so I think that might have had something to do with it. Like Angel was taking up for her teammate who ended up having, as good a game practically as Caitlin did, so whatever. I mean, it is what it is. All right. And we've spent, I think, probably too much time on this. I would love to see LSU and Iowa play on the, like in the regular schedule next year. I think it'd be crazy if they don't get together and do that. Yeah. Because Clark and Reese are both back next year.
Yep.
So that would be a real marquee matchup if they did it in, around Thanksgiving or Christmas or something before.
Especially for one of them to be at home, because obviously March Madness is the best situation, but can you imagine LSU playing at Iowa with all Iowa fans or vice versa?
Look, where that game was at American Airlines Arena in Dallas?
Yes. Bring
it back. Neutral site, fill up that arena with both fan bases and let's go. To me, I think that would be great.
Yeah.
Put it in a neutral site in as big a stadium as you can and sell the tickets for as much as you can and fill that thing with, 30, 40,000 people would be unbelievably good for women's basketball.
Yeah.
So to me, I think that's the smart play, how you make this really like a positive thing for the game and for the schools involved. And hopefully, there's enough, promotership in those two athletic departments to go and make this happen.
It wouldn't be a bad thing. I think, obviously I love the game because I played it, but basketball in general, I think it's just a sport that is fast moving. It's a lot of fun. And, I have my opinions about the WNBA, but it would be nice if some things changed in the college years, because maybe it would help the NBA too, WNBA too. We'll see. I don't know. Did you see that? What's his face? Tom Brady bought a chunk of a WNBA team. Somebody's
The one
already
in
he's
Vegas,
making,
right?
huh?
I think it's the one in Vegas, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I was like, So
Yeah.
maybe.
Well, guess what? You can't get a bigger trash talker in the NFL than Tom Brady, by the way. So
all the champions,
course.
man,
Yeah.
all the champions have potty mouths and say crazy stuff. At least that's been my experience. Oh my goodness. There was a redheaded on my team, and she was crazy, and everybody feared her, and rightfully so, both her mouth and her ability. Oh my goodness, a lot of fun. All right, before we go, folks, I want to talk to you about one small thing, and we're going to go from something culturally interesting and fun to something that it was fun for me. I think it will be fun for you, but it is not something that typically people get excited about, which is going to museums. However, last week I took a week off, went out into the hill country of Texas. And when you think of Texas, the hill country is like Scott Lake, Texas. You see all the longhorns, you see the cows, the rolling hills, everybody's in cowboy hats. And I mean, at one point, my son and I were counting pickup trucks. There maybe every once in a while there was a car, but it was pretty much just all trucks, and everybody around there was a rancher, and that's where you're at. Well, in Fredericksburg, where we went to the National Museum of the Pacific War, of all things. It's a kind of a museum you would think would be in like San Diego or something, right. or Hawaii even, but it's in Fredericksburg, Texas, and it's dedicated to those who served in World War II's Pacific Theater, which I feel is like the forgotten theater of World War II, but was the most brutal and the worst. It's just terrible. I highly, highly recommend it. We have a lot of people who watch us and read the American Spectator who are veterans, who are patriots. If you have the time, I would not suggest going in the summer. Come in the spring or the fall where it's not so stinking hot.
Central Texas is tough in July and August.
In July. There are 732 wineries now in the hill country around Fredericksburg. So you can get great wine, great German food, because it was settled by Germans. And the reason it's there is because Admiral Nimitz was born there. And the museum is quite possibly one of the best national museums I've been to. And if you could have pushed me over with a feather. First off, it's like you're walking downtown, you walk by and you're like, wait a minute, what's that? And so we went, and it takes a couple hours to go through, but it was just really the one take home that I got from it. Well, there were multiple, but after going through it, you really get the impression that there is no way World War II would have ended with Japan without the nuclear bombs.
Absolutely not.
You get a real, and that seems like a theoretical discussion that a lot of people have, but when you kind of walk through the history, and they do a very good job of, because it's walking a line, because the Japanese were committed such atrocities, that you don't even want to, how do you teach that to children and not scar them for life? So they did a really good job walking the line, and still you get the impression unequivocally that the only way the war could have ended was with those nuclear bombs. And it's a complete travesty that it had to happen. But I think that the war would have gone on and on and on just because of the mentality of the Japanese people at the time.
Well,
And-
a similar experience is the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, which started off as the National D-Day Museum. And it was founded in New Orleans because the Higgins boats that you landed on the beaches in World War II were built in New Orleans.
Oh.
A guy named Andrew Higgins was the company, and those were, they were swamp boats that they basically repurposed to use as landing craft. And so, that was kind of what, this thing in the warehouse district in New Orleans, which has just grown and grown and grown and grown. And, it has a number of different exhibits, one of which, talks about the landings on all these different islands in the Pacific War. And the same point is made, which is, they had done studies on, okay, when we're, if we land troops in Japan and we, when we're going to, clear that archipelago of enemy action. I mean, they were talking about it's going to cost 700,000 or 800,000 American lives. Okay. And millions of Japanese lives.
Yeah.
And, you had, between Hiroshima and Nagasaki, a couple 100,000 people died. That's nothing compared to what an actual invasion of Japan and having to fight your way through all of those islands with, guys with bamboo spears coming at you and have to shoot them. I mean, they were in the process of ordering 1 million body bags for American troops. If they were going to do this. And all of these, and there's a great scene in Band of Brothers. And of course, the Band of Brothers people actually did a series called The Pacific, which is excruciating to watch.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
I can only
they did a really good job of depicting just how awful those things were. And there's a number of other really, really good movies that have been made about about the individual battles, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and so forth. But there's a scene in Band of Brothers toward the end where, these guys are all, okay, the war in Europe is over. Now they're going to make us go, to the Pacific because we're going to have to invade Japan.
Right.
And these guys, they were all like, oh, I can't believe I've had to go through all of this over the last, year and a half just to go die in Japan. Right. And I mean, there's this whole thing of these guys, oh, wait, I got my discharge papers. Sweet. I get to go home. I'm not going to have to die in Japan. They all thought they were going to die in Japan.
Yeah.
I mean, they all thought, these guys all
they
had
would have
cousins and friends and whatever that were fighting in the Pacific, and they were trading letters back and forth. And they knew, they heard about, Okinawa had 15,000 Americans die. Right. They knew about that. And the idea that we were, in the middle of that war, that we can't drop a nuke because we don't want to, we don't want to hurt all these people. And it's like, are you serious?
Yeah.
The whole point of dropping the nuke on Hiroshima was that the horror of the thing would be so great that the Japanese would immediately surrender, and that was it. They had to drop Nagasaki because nothing happened.
Yeah.
And it was like, do we have to keep doing this? And then finally, after they dropped the one on Nagasaki, it was like, okay, now it's done. I mean, it's the most humanitarian decision ever made.
Yes. And even still, when the commander of the Japanese army signed the papers, one of his generals still rallied a revolt against him. I mean, it was just, the whole thing is beyond comprehension. I didn't realize that there was also a museum in New Orleans. I'm gonna now I want to come visit that.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't recommend anybody go to New Orleans right now, but the next time New Orleans is a viable place,
Mhm.
definitely go, because it's amazing what's there.
Yeah.
Amazing. And you know,
Well,
you had talked about
Fredericksburg,
like,
you'll be safe. You can come out and actually enjoy good food and wine, some beautiful Airbnbs, and out in the middle of the big
yeah,
sky of
hill country
Texas.
in Texas is fantastic.
Oh, it's beautiful.
I mean, I
And
hate to even tell people about it, because the next thing you know, there'll be a million people living there and it won't be as nice. But
well, that's funny you mentioned that, because I was looking at housing in Fredericksburg just for giggles and grins. And it's about an hour for people who are listening, about hour and 15 minutes or so west of Austin. The housing market is so absurd
oh, it is. Yeah.
and overvalued. Like it's insane. You buy a shack for 500,000,
Yeah.
a normal little bungalow for 2 million in the middle of nowhere, Texas. No, thank you. I think that's just insane.
It's yeah, and New Braunfels, which is close by, is
Yes.
the same thing, and all these
Yep.
like all these little towns in the hill country in central Texas. It's the same prices as Austin, and you're like, well, okay, Austin, I kind of get, like, but what's going on here? And it's supply and demand. People want to move there. It's a neat place, and like the developers know it, so all they're building is the high end stuff.
Yeah.
And so you
yeah.
can't get anything for less than $500,000 there.
It's crazy. However, it's worth visiting for sure. And for those of you in America who are like sick of long plane flights and whatever, this is a truly worth your time. And there's also just outside of Fredericksburg, it might be in the city limits, I don't know, but one of the camps when settlers lived there, the first and German settlers, there's some interesting history there because of course they're still fighting off Indians, but it was one of the few places there was a German aristocrat who made peace with the local Indians. And so there was never a battle there. They made peace and traded and it was all good. And so like the armies who, the people who were stationed there, who were sent down from Minnesota, basically we're on vacation. They really didn't have much to do there. And so you kind of get a real sense nothing got destroyed. In other words, the little homes that they had built, the little cabins, and are still there. It's a really neat historical place to get kind of a sense of Americana, where you're safe and you can hang out with your family, bring your family. Totally worth it. It's just a great little place. I had no idea myself, and I'm not that far from it. So worth your time. And if, all I could think of while I was going through this is the kind of stupidity of the thinking of why these folks went to war, and how in this case it was just inane what the Japanese were up to and what they thought they were going to do. Just a weird mentality. And I feel like we're getting to that place again in the world, in history, where really tensions are high and for really stupid things. And that, I feel like in Europe, we're bumbling towards a disaster again with the United States economic policy. We tend to think we're immune, or that we're too modern for this kind of horrible thing to happen. And that civilization is just
it's exactly what everybody thought in 1914.
Yes.
It's exactly what everybody thought then, right? Yep. It's like we have progressed beyond the point where we need war to settle anything, and it'll never happen. And so, when the Archduke got killed, and it was like, well, we'll mobilize the armies, and then we'll do a deal, and it'll all be over. And then all of a sudden, it was, no, we're going to win this war. And 5 years later, there's like barely anybody left alive.
Yeah.
And the people who are in charge now, not smarter than the people in 1914.
No.
So that's, it's more than a little scary. And it's so funny. Marjorie Taylor-Green is the voice of reason, who says, hey, why don't we make peace?
And
it's,
people,
oh, you're a moron for saying that. It's like,
right.
so the smart position is for us to fight World War III against Russia over the Donbass. Oh, okay. Tell me about Marjorie Taylor-Green and how stupid she is again. Like, tell me that.
Right.
But make sure you speak very clearly so we can understand. Right.
Right.
I mean, and all of these war museums you go to, like, if you're paying attention, you get that lesson, which is, dumbass politicians who, have evil motivations. And I'm not just talking about American dumbass politicians, because other countries have dumbass politicians too. And the Germans and the Japanese had especially dumbass politicians.
Yeah.
Lead to ruin. So stay away from dumbass politicians. And, I don't know. That's hard to do, apparently.
Apparently, although I will say in Finland, they booted that
dumbass is gone.
That dumbass is gone. The dumbass in New Zealand is gone. But guess what she's doing for free? She has made it her life mission to eliminate extremism. I don't know if you're aware of this, but evidently New Zealand's a hotbed of extremism.
So I've heard.
Online. And so that's what her new mission is.
I thought her new mission was to get pregnant. I thought, like, when she resigned, that was what she said, is she told the TV reporter husband, or not husband or whatever, hey, let's get married and let's have another kid. They had one kid, they didn't get married. Now they're going to get married, and she wanted to have another kid. I thought that's what she was going to do.
Well, she's a woman.
I guess she's got plenty of time to do other things too.
Yes, so she
censor people online while she's trying to have a kid.
Yeah,
sounds very sexy.
Very sexy. Well, on that note, I would say, based on what we just ended with, prepare for World War III, ammo up. We're not getting smarter. Anyway. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. We'll see you next week. Make sure to like, subscribe, do the things to help us spread the word here. And thanks so much, Scott. Good to be back.